Resident Evil is one of my favorite franchises, and I bought every one of them that ever came out on the Nintendo Switch. Now, with improved results for Switch 1 games running on the Nintendo Switch 2 in terms of backwards compatibility for some titles, I thought it would be fun to take a look at all of the Resident Evil games that released for the Nintendo Switch 1 running on the Nintendo Switch 2 to see what kind of upgrades we got. Do we get better performance? Do we get better visual quality? Or is there no difference at all? Now, I only included games that came out fully, so there's no cloud versions of the games because I feel like there's not really going to be a difference in the cloud version anyways because it's just streaming. But these are all games that released for the Nintendo Switch 1 that can be purchased right now. So without any further ado, let's hop into the world of Resident Evil. I'll even give some thoughts and little mini reviews about how I feel about these games and see how these Switch 1 games are running on the Nintendo Switch 2. All right, so first off, we're going to take a look at Resident Evil 0, a bit of a polarizing game when it comes to the Resident Evil franchise, but one I think gets harshly treated for no, real reason. I guess there are some drawbacks to this game as far as a Resident Evil game is concerned, but it introduced a lot of new mechanics and a lot of new things. I think the story of the game is very well done. The characters are all very interesting, essentially a prelude to the events in Raccoon City for Resident Evil, the original game, but the game did have some flaws. Now, the two-character system I don't think was necessarily a flaw, but there was one thing that really stood out with this game, and that was kind of getting rid of the traditional item boxes. So in Resident Evil games up until this point, you had item boxes where you could store items and then make them accessible throughout various item boxes in the game. And for whatever reason in this game, they were just like, you know what? No item boxes. We don't need item boxes. Leave the items on the floor and they won't disappear, which in theory is not a bad thing because then you can just discard items at your leisure instead of having to use the item box. But in practicality, it requires you to basically leave items somewhere in the game and then go back and access those items when you need them. So not exactly an ideal system and definitely one of the biggest flaws with Resident Evil 0. That being said, I do not think that this is a bad game. Now, looking at this game running on the Nintendo Switch 2, I wasn't really expecting too much. Some of these games are going to be more impactful in terms of the visual upgrades or the performance upgrades, but games like this, I mean, they're pretty much set in stone. Resident Evil 0 is a 30 frames per second game no matter what platform you play it on. Of course, it has the high resolution HD graphics, so you're not really seeing much of a major difference in terms of how this game runs on the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the Nintendo Switch original platform. However, there is one key difference that you will see throughout this video, and that is loading times. I would say that loading times are much better in this version of the game than they were on the original Nintendo Switch. Now, it's definitely not like a huge deal or anything like that, but being able to shave off a few seconds here and there when it comes to loading times for, entering different rooms and going from one area to another definitely is a very positive thing to do. And honestly, I think this game still holds up really well. Like when I was capturing footage for this game, I was like, wow, this still looks like really, really good. Like the character models look very nice. The environments themselves look really nice. The lighting is good as well. I think this is a really underrated Resident Evil game, and I get it because it's not one of the better ones, but it's still a fun game as long as you're able to kind of keep that inventory management system in mind when playing throughout the game. The combat is still tried and true Resident Evil. You could see here my shooting was way off because I'm playing a bunch of different Resident Evil games that all have different control schemes, so it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world, but I do think that this game is, worth playing. And the Nintendo Switch 2 version now with the slightly improved loading times over the Nintendo Switch 1 version of the game, I mean, it's the best way to play it on a Nintendo platform. You also get the widescreen that was introduced in this HD version of the game, but, you know, nothing too crazy as far as enhancements are concerned with Resident Evil 0, but a good game nonetheless, and one that still looks really good today. And I don't know, I kind of wish that, like, we still focused on games like this with fixed camera angles and stuff. There's just something very nostalgic about it for me. Next up, we have Resident Evil Remake. This was originally, of course, a GameCube game, much like Resident Evil 0 was, which technically Resident Evil 0 started off as an N64 game. And once again, this is another great game. A lot of nostalgia for this game. I love the original. I love the GameCube version. No matter where I'm playing it, I'm going to enjoy it. And once again, you know, this is a game that is locked at 30 frames per second, no matter the platform. So you're not really going to see much in terms of a performance boost. You're not really going to see much in terms of a visual boost. But the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game, much like with Resident Evil 0, does see an improvement in loading times. Going through these doors is definitely quicker than it was on the original Nintendo Switch. Which, I mean, you know, once again, not the biggest deal in the world or anything like that, but it is a nice way to sort of save a little bit of time, because you kind of notice longer loading times when you're playing a game that's on another platform that's a little bit weaker. That's one of the improvements of this system that we're seeing with the Nintendo Switch 2, and this sort of forced backwards compatibility with some of the upgrades in the games. It's not always going to be things that are going to, you know, shine a light right in your eyes and be clearly noticeable right off the jump. It's going to be the little details and stuff like that. I still think Resident Evil Remake holds up pretty well. This was kind of weird to me. Like, you notice how fast he's moving? I don't know if that's just exclusive to the Switch 2 version or what, but I definitely noticed that when I was playing this game, because I've been messing around with it prior to filming this video, and I noticed, like, Chris was moving like you could move him super fast, and I don't know, it's something about it just feels really weird. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if that's just specific to the Switch 2 version of the game or what. It has been a long time since I have played this game. I will say, I do think Resident Evil 0's HD version looks a bit better than this game does. Like, some of the backgrounds and stuff look a little bit washed out, but then you get nice scenes like you see right here, lighting the fireplace, and like, look at how good this still looks, man. Like, this looks crazy good if they could just, you know, increase some of the visual fidelity in the background. But another classic game. Once again, the improvements are less noticeable than some of the other games that we're going to be talking about and showcasing, but still a very enjoyable time, a great game. And if you've never played it before, I think it still holds up. I love all of these games, so, you know, your mileage is going to vary. How about some Resident Evil 4 for the Nintendo Switch 2? This is a game that I have played many, many times before. As you can see, this is a save file that I have where your boy's got a little unlimited rocket launcher, because I have played and beaten this game numerous times on the original Nintendo Switch. And yeah, once again, you know, this is a game that already looked great on the Switch. It already ran great on the Switch, and you're not really going to notice too much of a difference here. The main thing is, once again, loading times. I would say the loading times, which you will actually see in this video, are like noticeably better. Like, that is actually something you will notice when you are playing this version of the game, especially if you played the game previously on the Switch. Going in between different environments is like absolutely seamless in terms of how fast everything happens. The game still looks great. The game still runs great. But, I mean, it's pretty much doing what it was on the Nintendo Switch 1. So, you know, with older games, you're not going to have, like, that same sort of big leap or anything like that. And there's actually another game that I'll show you guys on this list that, once again, you know, it's already kind of maxed out for it, so you can't really expect too much with it. But, I mean, Resident Evil 4 is still a great game. Of course, the Nintendo Switch version of the game, and by extension the Switch 2 version, does have motion control support with Joy-Cons, which makes it a really great version of the game. I was actually one of those people that Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube did not click with me. I had the game. I actually sold it to a friend because I wasn't really feeling it. And then once I played the Wii version, I was like, okay, I get it now. I was also kind of the mindset that it was kind of, so much more action-based than the previous Resident Evil games up until Code Veronica. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. But now I love this game. I think it's absolutely awesome. I know people love the remake as well. Lord Salazar, Salazar is cooler in this version of the game. I've been expecting you, my brethren. Like, they kind of neutered Salazar in the Resident Evil 4 remake, and I do hold that against them, like fully and truly hold that against them. But once again, this is a great version of the game already. You do get better load times with it. You do have the Joy-Con aiming with this as well. So I think it is worth checking out. And you can see here, like, the loading times are just so much better. Everything is so much snappier. So yeah, another win for Nintendo Switch 2. But now we're getting into the games that are going to be much more noticeable with the system. So this is a game that I've actually only beaten one time. I didn't really love it when it first came out. I did play through a good portion of it with my buddy, but I don't know. It just felt kind of weird. But Resident Evil 5 is where we really start to see noticeable improvements for the Nintendo Switch 2 running the game versus the Nintendo Switch 1. Now, this game, of course, kind of a polarizing game with the teammate system and, having to go back and forth between the teammates, sharing inventory and stuff like that. It was kind of like Resident Evil 0, but definitely ramped up a bit. You can play with people in local or online co-op, which does make it pretty cool. But the Nintendo Switch 1 version of the game tried to target 60 frames per second, but there definitely was a lot of hiccups with that, and more often than not, the game did not hit the 60 frames. However, playing Resident Evil 5 on the Nintendo Switch 2 actually does now run at 60 frames per second. Now, I have heard that when you're doing the split screen, there is some frame rate drops that still occur. It does target 60 frames, but sometimes it will go below it. However, if you're just playing by yourself or playing with someone online or something like that, you actually do get 60 frames per second. And this is a noticeable improvement in my opinion, because it just feels like so much smoother and it just feels so much better overall. I can't really confirm or deny this because I actually did play through this game originally on the Switch 1. That was the only time I beat it. But I also feel like it looks a little better. Not like it looked terrible on the Switch 1, but it just looks a little bit cleaner to me. Once again, I could be making that up. That could just be a figment of my imagination, but I do feel like it does look a bit sharper than it did on the Switch 1. But even if it doesn't, that 60 frames per second is definitely very, very noticeable, and it makes for a really good experience of Resident Evil 5. I honestly think that this is one of the better ways to play the game now because of the fact that you can play it portably and now it runs at 60 frames per second. Is it worth picking up? I mean, it's kind of action orientated. They kind of went in the Resident Evil 4 direction and cranked up the sort of action to higher levels than what you saw in Resident Evil 4. Storyline wise, it's kind of wonky. The end battle is, of course, an iconic thing for probably all the wrong reasons, but I do like the setting of the game. I think, having Chris come back as the main character was cool. That ending is just bizarre. That ending fight is just bizarre. But this is a great way to play Resident Evil 5 if you've never played it before or if you did not finish the game originally. And you're actually going to see here, load times are a bit quicker as well. Everything is smooth, nice and snappy from the kicking of the door right into the cutscene. Oh no, white woman damsel in distress. Here comes her meth head boyfriend and he's very protective of her. I am sure she's not going to do anything terrible to us or freak out. Oh my God. Trying to save the white girl and look at what happened to you. It's just a damn shame. This is what drugs do to you, kids. If you're younger and you're watching this video, you probably shouldn't be watching it, but this is what drugs do. And then the boyfriend's gonna come out. Look, here comes the boyfriend. What are you doing? Get out of my apartment house thing. It's crumbling down. But yeah, Resident Evil. I don't know where I was going with that. Resident Evil 5. You know, a solid game, a fun action game with some horror elements to it. And now that it runs at 60 frames per second on the Nintendo Switch 2, if you have it for the Switch 1, I think it's worth playing through again. If you don't have it, it goes on sale pretty often, just like most of these games do for Resident Evil games. Now we got a polarizing one. Everyone hates Resident Evil 6. Everyone except one man. And that one man is me. I do not hate Resident Evil 6. I think it's a weird game. I think some of the campaigns are better than others. I think they went crazy with the action elements of the game. They went crazy with the story elements. They went crazy with the set piece. Like it's more of an action game with little droplets of horror than a horror game. I mean, look at this gunplay here. As you can see, like we are well equipped to go through these streets right now. However, Resident Evil 6 on the Nintendo Switch 1 was once again a game that did not hit 60 frames all of the time. It was targeting it, but more often than not, it did not accomplish it. But now, on the Nintendo Switch 2, it does indeed hit 60 frames per second. And this is once again a very noticeable difference. Like, I have a very strange story with Resident Evil 6. I beat the game on the Switch 1 because originally I had it on the PlayStation 3, but I had a knockoff dual shock controller. And in one of the driving scenes, you have to use the dual shock in order to steer the vehicle or like steer a gun on the back of the vehicle. So I literally couldn't do it because I didn't have a DualShock 3 controller. So I never finished the game. So when it came out on the Switch, I was like, well, I could buy it and check it out in a video, and then if I enjoy it, I'll play through it. And I do enjoy this game. Like, once again, it's probably worse than Resident Evil 5, but there are some cool elements to it. I think Leon's mission is a lot of fun. Like, you know, it feels Resident Evil-y. Like, yeah, there's some dumb stuff in this. But now, once again, we got the game running at a locked 60 frames per second. I like to yell when my teammate is not right there. I will constantly remind them, hey, come and help me out. We have to kick down this door. But I almost think this game might look a little sharper too. Much like Resident Evil 5, this seems to look a little sharper. And that could just be because of the frame rate being better. You know, everything just kind of flows a bit better and it looks a bit nice. But honestly, I think this game still looks pretty good too. Like, it's not a bad looking game. It's just kind of wonky in terms of a lot of things. But I have a special place in my heart for this game. I do not think it's nearly as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. And I get why a lot of people don't like it. But at the same time, it's like, you know, this was in Capcom's dark era. This was the Resident Evil dark era. I am out of stamina. Look at that little wimpy kick I just gave that guy. This was when, you know, Capcom was kind of struggling with their identity. They were kind of trying to figure things out. And this is just the direction they went in. A lot of games were going in this direction. So I don't really hold that against Capcom. And I'm definitely glad that they righted a lot of the wrongs of this game. But I do think that this game is still kind of fun, especially if you have someone to play it with. This game also offers local co-op or online play where two people can play. And, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. There are way worse games that you can play than this game. If you have a friend, it's even more fun. But even if you're just like a Resident Evil fan and you've kind of written off this game forever, which I don't necessarily blame you for doing that, I think Resident Evil 6 is still decent enough. And the increase in performance for the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game versus the Nintendo Switch 1 definitely makes for a much improved experience. So if you want to play it and you want to experience this game, this is a great way to play it now. And there's going to be a really cool thing right here. This dude was just chilling, man. I almost feel bad, but hey, pal, I got to move this I gotta move this payload, and now a body's watching the bottom corner of the screen here. Whoa, where did you come from, pal? You must have ascended up the ladder. Now, here is a game that actually sees really, I haven't noticed any sort of improvements in it, and that is Resident Evil Revelations. Now, Resident Evil Revelations originally was a Nintendo 3DS game, a Nintendo 3DS timed exclusive, actually, that was then ported to pretty much everything. Now, Resident Evil Revelations, when it got console ports, was already at 1080p, 60 frames per second. So there's really not much more you can do with this game, pal. Like, it's still a great looking game, and I decided to include this game, though, because I just want to talk about it for a little bit, because I think this is the most underrated Resident Evil game of all time. I think it's a perfect blend of action Resident Evil style games and the survival horror Resident Evil style games. There's different missions, there's different characters that you play as, and they play very differently than other characters. Sometimes it's more so about resource management and tight corridors. Sometimes it's big budget, movie-like action scenes like you're seeing with this scene here. And I really appreciate that with this game. I think the Switch version of the game is fantastic as well. And by extension, the Switch 2 version of the game is fantastic as well. It's just, there's really nothing I noticed with this. And this is a game that I have played a ton over the years. Played it and beat it on the 3DS. Played it and beat it on the Wii U. Played it and beat it on PS4, I believe it was. And of course, I've played it and beat it on the Switch as well. So I didn't really notice anything as far as like loading times were concerned. Everything just kind of seemed to be the way that it always is with this game. I just wanted to include it because it's a game that definitely deserves more shine. It's constantly on sale. It's still a great way to play it. You're just really not seeing any sort of major improvements over the Switch 1 version. And our final game is probably the most impressive one that I've seen thus far, and that is Resident Evil Revelations 2. Now, Resident Evil Revelations 2 was a game I actually bought when it first came out. I remember Wood and I used to play this a lot online because it had a really fun online mode to it. But this game did not run very well, and honestly, it didn't look very well either. And when I booted this up, I was actually shocked. Now, once again, we are getting 60 frames per second, which is, of course, very, very nice. The original Nintendo Switch version of the game targeted 60, I believe, but I don't think it really hit it. More often than not, there was lots of hiccups and stuff in the gameplay. But I think this game actually looks like better, visually speaking, as well, because when I played this game on the Switch 1, I was constantly like, this looks kind of crusty, like it doesn't look like super good. But when I booted this up on the Switch 2, I was like, whoa, I do not remember this game looking this clean, and now it does. Now, Revelations 2, as far as the game is concerned, I wouldn't say that I like it more than Revelations 1, although there is more content and more side content, and the online is a bit different as well. But you can see here, we're getting very snappy loading times. We're getting 60 frames per second performance, and I think the game looks better. I could just be crazy. I could just be out of my mind, which, I mean, depending on who you ask, that's what they'll say. But this was a pleasant surprise. I might actually play through this game again just because of how good it looks and how good it performs now, because like I always kind of struggled when playing this game. Like I was like, it's a little jank, it's not the best looking game. But now it's like a whole breath of fresh air with this, upgrade on the Nintendo Switch 2. Whether or not the visual upgrade actually exists, I can't really say. I think it does, but maybe it doesn't. Even if it doesn't, the performance upgrade of the game now running at 60 frames per second and loading times being pretty much obsolete after you load into a level make it more than an enjoyable experience. I think it actually makes it a much better experience, to the point of where it actually improves the quality of the game running on the platform. So that was a look at Resident Evil games on the Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, all of these are Nintendo Switch 1 games that are running via backwards compatibility on the Switch 2. And obviously, some games are more impressive than others, but regardless, like, you're gonna get better loading times. Maybe there was better loading times in Revelations 1. I don't know. Like, that game didn't really have too much loading for me to notice when playing through it. But, you know, at least you're getting better load times, and in some cases you are getting much improved performance and possibly even visual quality looking a little bit cleaner. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm a big Resident Evil fan, and I never really talk too much about the games aside from when like a new one comes out, or, you know, some news or rumors. So this was kind of a way for me to give you guys my thoughts on the entire Resident Evil franchise that's come out on the Switch, because I already owned them anyways and I've played through them. So I thought this would be a fun video. If you like videos like this and there's another franchise maybe you want me to check out all of the games on that came out on the Switch and see how they run on the Switch too, let me know in the comment section down below, because I probably already own them. And as always, thank you guys for checking out this video. If you made it all the way to the end, you are an absolute rock star, and I sincerely appreciate you. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. Be sure to like, comment, share the video around if you enjoyed it. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.